Shellshock presents.
Ready?
Sharing with Shellshock Season 4.
New Age of Heroes.
All right, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Sharing with Shellshock. I am your host, ShellshockPrime, and here we are today with an episode on the Game Boy. And we got two returning guests. We got Macaw. Welcome back.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Pretty good. Very busy weekend, and not just because of the Switch 2, but
Yeah.
I'm doing pretty good.
Yep. And what about you, Nostalgia Alchemist? Good to see you back on, Jeremy.
Hey, thanks. It's always a pleasure. I am so excited. Every time I come on to one of your podcasts, I feel like we have a blast. So this is going to be no different. I'm very excited. Thanks again.
Yep. And of course, yes, I am wearing a Switch 2 hat that I got back at the Nintendo New York launch on Wednesday night going into Thursday. And
how was that? It looked amazing.
it was awesome, like draining, but awesome. But I had a great time. But today's not about the Switch 2. It's about the Game Boy. And the Switch 2 wouldn't even be a thing, or even the Switch. They would not be anywhere without Game Boy, because without Game Boy, there are no handhelds from Nintendo. So,
That's right.
So before we get started on talking about the Game Boy, Michael Macaw, let us know what type of content you do.
I'm a variety streamer as well as a voice actor. You can catch me on my Twitch channel multiple times a week, and going to be in a couple games soon, but can't really say more than that right now.
All right. What about you, Jeremy?
All right. Well, my name is Jeremy. I am the Nostalgia Alchemist. I'm always here for whenever you remember why. And when you come to my channel, whether it be on Twitch or over to my podcast, I am trying to do something a little bit interesting in these times. I'm trying to glance back to focus forward. While nostalgia is something that is good for fond remembrance, it is also utilized in some ways that we need to help change. And so we want to focus forward in a positive and progressive light. So basically what I do is to take gaming or pop culture or even everyday nostalgia and to look at it in a way that is befitting of allowing us good memories while also trying to focus on making things better for tomorrow. So yeah, that's pretty much what I do. And you can find me anywhere. Just type in the Nostalgia Alchemist on the internet and my beautiful face will pop up somewhere.
All right, sounds good. All right, great. So before we get started, I want to briefly talk about like the Game Boy as a whole. Like, it came out back in 1989. In Japan, like, it came out first, but over here we got a packing game. So the original plan for it to for it to have a packing game was the fact that it was actually supposed to be Super Mario Land, but it was later changed to Tetris. The reason that it was changed to Tetris is because when Hank Rogers was brought in to see the Game Boy, because he at the time was trying to get Tetris off the ground outside of Russia and trying to bring it over to Japan, bring it over to the United States and everywhere else around the world, he noticed that like Nintendo was planning to put Super Mario Land as a packing game, but he suggested Tetris, and the reason for that is because he said that if you put Super Mario Land as the packing game, then people will think that the Game Boys were boys. But if you put Tetris as a packing game, then people will think that the Game Boy is for everyone. And Tetris ended up being like one of the best-selling games on the Game Boy. So, and it ended up working out. And since then, we got multiple iterations of the Game Boy, like between the Pocket, the Color, Advance. There was also the Game Boy Light, which was only Japan. There was the Game Boy Advance SP, the Game Boy Micro. And then it just stopped because the DS took over. So, um, so yeah, like yes, the Tetris the movie from Hollywood, like the one that was on the Apple TV, that was actually a really good movie. I did see that.
It was good. I actually enjoyed it. I think that they had to be a little overzealous with, keeping the plot moving and keeping things tense and progressing.
Yeah.
But overall, yeah, it definitely told the story that needed to be told.
Yes.
And Tetris Forever is an excellent like interactive documentary retelling that whole story as well. You even get to play like a few of those older versions of Tetris. Game Boy Tetris is not on there, but there are a few other Game Boy Tetris games, as well as an extensive like video section on that original Tetris Game Boy.
And they actually were able to put it on Nintendo Switch Online. So that was really nice that they were able to do that too around that time.
Yeah. So let's start with the first question. And Michael, we'll start with you. When have you first heard of the Game Boy, and when did you get one?
So this is going back very far. Obviously, I was born in 1987, so I was only three when the Game Boy came out in America. I think my first exposure to actually seeing it and seeing what it was back in the day. We had a local Blockbuster, and I think they had like a small kiosk where you could see like the Game Boy plugged into like the demo station with the little screens of various games running on it. And I think I just like at the time, like I was so young, so I just kind of associated like all video games to just be like the same thing. So I'm like, oh, I want those. I have the NES. Can I get those too? And I didn't for a while, but yeah, that's more or less how I found out about it. I of course was way too young to be following like game news back then. So it was just like when I saw the system existed, I was then like, oh, I want that.
Yeah.
Looks cool.
Oh, absolutely. What about you, Jeremy?
Right. So I remember I actually have proof that I received it when I was turning 5 years old. So I have a picture of myself holding the Game Boy box when I turned 5. So I had already gotten a NES the year before in '89. So for my 5th birthday in 1990, do the math. So I had gotten the Game Boy box that around that time. So I remember getting it. I remember opening it and trying to play Tetris, but I also got Super Mario Land at the same time. And at 5, Tetris is quite a feat. So I definitely started to play Super Mario Land. Mega Man 2, I think, was another one that I got later on. But I know that my first couple of Game Boy games that I received were Super Mario Land, Pac-In Tetris, Paperboy, and Baseball, the Nintendo version of Baseball. Those were like my first like couple of games that I got within a span of a couple of months. I had a lot of relatives who were able to give me those things, so I was very lucky at the time to be able to get a couple of games to start. But yeah, I definitely remember it being like a 5th birthday gift. I also remember receiving the game Go Monkey Go. I don't know if anybody remembers this game. You have to look it up. Okay, so just briefly, I remember in the same breath of me getting the Game Boy and then Go Monkey Go. And it's this game where you have to like pull monkeys up to collect coconuts and bring them back down. And I just remember this very distinctly because I played it with my cousins, but I digress. So yes, I have a very good fond memory of first receiving my Game Boy, and it is right here with the original pack-in. This is my original Game Boy that I had since I was 5 years old, and this is my original pack-in of Tetris since I got it.
All right.
Pretty awesome stuff.
Nice.
Absolutely. So I first heard of the Game Boy, like, I want to say it was like, I don't think it was 89. It was definitely like at least 1990. Mainly because of commercials. I would see it in commercials all the time whenever I was watching TV. And they would have commercials for video games. Usually, like, the most common ones are whatever was from Nintendo or Sega around that time. And I would see the Game Boy advertise a bunch. I would see Tetris. I would see like Super Mario Land. And then over the years, I would see so many different commercials for Game Boy. Some of the ones that stick out for me were like, it was one where you see like, it was like a swirling hypnotism Like it's like all red, and you see Wario's like, "Obey me, Wario," because that was the one that advertised.
Mario is your enemy.
It advertised his first appearance in Super Mario Land 2, and that between that, I remember like a couple of the Kirby commercials. Like there was one in which that he like he was being paired up with this muscular guy, like the super dude bro muscular guy, and he was being outclassed in everything, but the one thing that Kirby can do is eat, and he just sucked him right up, and then he was gone.
Muscle guy. He sucks up the muscle guy.
Yes.
That was like my favorite. I was like, oh, I like this.
Yes.
Destroy the bullies.
I do, and one other example of a Game Boy commercial that I do remember was like the Pokemon commercial, as Charlotte Don't Surf brought up. Like there was this bus driver who he had all these Pokemon in the bus, then he got out of it and crushed the bus.
Yes.
You would think that the Pokemon would have died, but instead, like, they just got brought into the Game Boy. But there was kind of a sequel to that commercial in a way, but it was like there was two kids just trading. There was a big LAN cable that went from one apartment building to another.
Yes.
And the bus driver appeared in that commercial. He was just stunned that the kids were just trading with each other. I remember seeing that.
I didn't know it was the same actor.
It was the same guy. And this,
oh, that's cool.
This commercial first aired in early '99. Like, like Pokemon was already established, but around that time was the Game Boy Color. So I remember that. And one other commercial I want to bring up, speaking of Game Boy Color, I remember the first Game Boy, there was actually a Game Boy Color commercial where there was this guy who he was a worker at like this fast food joint, and he does the drive-through. There was a family who just wanted to place an order, but he was too busy playing Super Mario Brothers Deluxe on the Game Boy Color. And and the family thought that he was talking to them, but he was just focusing on the game. And in the end, I remember all he said was "kiss my toadstool goodbye," and then the family just left.
Yep.
That was like, I got that game afterwards. By the way, it's actually a really good port of Super Mario Brothers, except for the fact that the screen crunch sucks. But other than that, it was actually a pretty good port. So I got a Game Boy very late. I was originally supposed to get a Game Boy back in the mid-90s, and Kirby's Dream Land would have been my first game. But the Game Boy just didn't work. I don't remember what happened, but it just didn't work. So unfortunately, like, because it was a gift, but we had to give it back because it didn't work. And then, like, on New Year's Eve, 1998, we got a Game Boy Pocket. We were only able to get one, so my brother and I had to share it. And we got Pokemon Blue. And the plan was we would get another Game Boy later on, and we would get Pokemon Red, which would happen later. Like, we got so I got the Game Boy, but then the Game Boy just stopped working, and I ended up saving my money to get a Game Boy Color. And had that, then it got stolen, only to get it back. I got the Game Boy Color back after it was getting stolen like 4 months ago, because there's this kid in school that just took it. And lesson learned: never leave your Game Boy inside your desk. That was a mistake that I made, and after that, never again. Just I just kept it in my pocket the whole time afterwards.
Yeah, I never left mine anywhere. I always carried it with me.
Yeah, because I didn't think that like anybody would just dig into your desk and steal it, but they found the person who did it, and then because it was the end of the school year, like he couldn't eat, like his suspension didn't last that long, because like the end of the school year was basically when he got caught.
Okay.
And then they knew that it was mine because there was like a little like engraving in the bottom of the back of the Game Boy that had my initials. So that's how they knew that it was mine.
Got it.
And I did get it, and then like unfortunately I don't have that Game Boy anymore, because I I think it stopped working after a while. But I still have my brother's Game Boy Color, which is the atomic purple Game Boy Color, which is the most
The one I have.
it's the most iconic color out of all the Game Boy Colors. But yeah, so
Yeah, it was smart to do a recognizable etching. That was smart.
yeah,
Yeah, that's what PVT Maverick said in the chat.
yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's when I got my Game Boy. It was a Game Boy Pocket that stopped working, and then got Game Boy Color, and have since bought multiple Game Boys afterwards. So the next one I'll ask you, Jeremy. What were some of your favorite memories and moments with any of the Game Boy handhelds? I'll start with you first on that.
Oh my gosh, where to begin? I remember being able to play video games outside of my house was a dream come true, especially when I didn't need to be anywhere of importance. My parents were able to bring us to, my sister and I, to this beach club that was down in Breezy Point in Queens, and we would go every summer. And I would bring my Game Boy every day. I would hide it so it didn't get stolen, and here it is. It's still here. I did a good job. But yeah, I remember playing a bunch of different games. I also remember that an old friend of mine and we had this idea called the Game Baby to make games simpler for like toddlers or tiny children. And we like went through this whole summer of like trying to like make fake designs and stuff. It was a lot of fun. I remember carrying the Game Boy with me to dance competitions. I remember carrying it with me to high school. I mean, I'm talking about all the iterations that are here, because the Game Boy SP, I think, came out around the time I was a junior or senior in high school. And then the Micro came out when I was just around entering my first or second year of college. So I mean, for basically my childhood, this was my portable gaming service. I loved my Game Boy. The best part about going into freshman year of high school was having my Game Boy Color on me and being able to play Super Mario Brothers Deluxe, because I was able to play one of my like first and also one of my like favorite games on the go in full. I think for me, my favorite Game Boy memory is playing Pokemon. Yeah, Pokemon. I mean, this is going to be a very huge chunk of this discussion anyway, but Pokemon was just huge. I mean, when it came out, I remember, even though this isn't a Pokemon discussion, I remember the first time seeing Pokemon was on one of the VHS tapes that Toys R Us sent out through Nintendo Power, and I got it, and those 11 minutes changed my whole existence for 8th grade into freshman year of high school. All I did, everything, Pokemon. And Shellshock, you'll appreciate this. This was my Game Boy holder for that year.
Ooh.
I still have it. And in the front, I've got, I think I still have it. No, probably in the inside here. I have Pinball.
Yep.
I have Silver. I've got, oh my gosh, my Red, which was my main game. So this is the main Pokemon game. True 151 get, Gold, Blue, trading card game, Yellow. I've got them all. And on the back of Yellow was a picture I took on Pokemon Snap. With the 2 electric Pikachus getting shocked. And this was actually a picture that I took that I brought to Blockbuster to get it taken to put on the back of this game specifically.
Nice.
But yeah, so definitely Pokemon was a huge part of it. I remember very distinctly beating the Cinnabar Island gym about 10 minutes before I had to go on at a dance competition.
Ooh, nice.
I distinctly remember that. Like, my friend and I were like, we have to beat this gym before I go on stage. So that was really cool. Really fun memory. When it comes to Game Boy Advance, I really enjoyed having my Game Boy Advance in high school. That was a lot of fun. I bought a lot of ports of Super Nintendo games for the Game Boy Advance, but my favorite thing that they did for the Game Boy Advance was come out with the clamshell design. And I said to myself, if we're getting a backlit clamshell design, I'm going to go all in. And I went in on the NES design that has the NES controller design. And alongside this, I also did myself a favor and picked up a slew of the NES classic NES games that were released for that version of the console.
Yes.
I really enjoyed that time being able to play these NES games on the go in a style befitting of it actually representing almost 1-to-1. Of course, with the ratio we can't, but playing basically 1-to-1 the games that we had on a home console system on the go. Like, this was just the beginning of being able to say, I think we have something here that we can take the original consoles on the go.
Yeah.
And then, of course, for the Game Boy Micro, this is a special edition. I actually have a nice memory of this. This is a 20th anniversary of Mario edition, which is now going to be 20 years old this year. I remember carrying this Game Boy Micro with me and a copy of Super Mario Advance 2 Super Mario World while I was filming my first independent film. So I kind of always had a Nintendo system in the background of me putting like my art and my talents at the forefront. So I think those are like my fondest Game Boy like memories, that I always had it on me to kind of like pass the time between shoots, between dance numbers. It was always just kind of there to be my little bit of an escape.
Yeah.
So those are some of my favorite memories.
All right. Sounds good. Those are some really good memories. What about you, Michael?
So I mean, pretty much something very similar. I took the Game Boy everywhere with me. In fact, I'd probably say I look forward to getting Game Boy games more than I would console games for a very long time. Just the fact that I was, able to play it at lunch during school, play it when I go out on the weekends, like when I go away on vacation. I'd almost always get that because my birthday is like right at the end of June, right before we'd always go on like a beach vacation or something like that. So there'd always be like a new game for the Game Boy that I'd get like right before one of those, and I would just be playing it like between like going to the beach and doing other stuff. So I have a lot of fun memories of that. But a couple in particular that really stand out was, of course, the day Pokemon Red and Blue came out in America. That also just happened to line up with a day off in September that I had from school that year. There was like a teacher conference going on that day.
Mhm.
So the students had off, and my mother had actually bought me, like got the copy for me, like either early or the day before somehow. I don't know, but it was just there the day, like when I woke up. And I was like, oh, this is great. So my brother and I played it all day. We got he got his own copy a couple days later because his birthday was actually like right after that. And I remember getting stuck for a long time, but then I also have a distinct memory of actually beating the end of Pokemon Red during his party because we were just hanging out at a relative's house for it. Actually, it's kind of weird because it like in my head the events don't seem to make sense, but I'm like, oh wait, we actually did go there. We did go to our relatives for my brother's birthday that year because I remember beating Pokemon while I was there. So that whole game was like a very distinct memory because obviously, it kicked off so much afterwards, but just playing through it, like it was such a different game for me because at the time I think the only other RPG I'd ever played was Mario RPG. So it was very interesting playing like this interesting collectathon game with like a heavy RPG focus in it. And I think that really both like turned me on to both like the concept of like collectathon, catching RPG games and RPGs in general. So I have a ton of like fond memories of that. Gen 2 just felt like such a step up too. So I like remember the Christmas I got that and then went and spent time at another relative's the whole week playing it. And I'm just like thinking like, that was such a fun week of my life. Even though I was just we were kind of going sightseeing half the time, but I'm also just thinking like I also spent a lot of time playing Pokemon, and it's just really good. I would say in terms of non-Pokemon memories, the most distinct one I have is probably the fact that, and again, it comes back to right before summer, birthday, all that stuff. The Game Boy Advance came out like 3 days before my birthday, and I remember getting it that year. That was also the year I finished grade school, so it felt like, oh, cool, like I'm moving up in life. I'm going to high school now, and I've got a better Game Boy, and everything's gonna be cool.
Yeah, that's how it felt for me too.
Yep.
Yeah, and to coincide with that, the DS came out like right as I was finishing high school, and the 3DS came out like a year after I finished college. So I almost kind of consider all those close together in terms of life events. So yeah, that was all like it's all very memorable. I just remember like popping in Mario Advance on the launch day, being taken to I think it's Walmart or Target, whatever one was closer at the time,
Hmm.
and getting Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2, which also got me into the Tony Hawk series because at the time I had never played one, and I just decided to get that on a whim, and it was very fun.
Yeah.
An isometric like 3D game on the Game Boy Advance. It just felt like so like, oh wow, this is such a step up from like Super Mario Land and Wario Land
Yep.
having going from like 16 colors to or however many it was to over like 32,000, I believe. I don't know how many could display at once. It was a lot. Um, and I mean, I have a lot of distinct memories of different games coming out. I would say one other than that's not Pokemon that sticks out in my head the most would probably be Mega Man Battle Network 2. Um, I mean, getting one was like a game that I wanted because at the time I was already like I was like reading Nintendo Power. I was following what games were coming out. I was very interested in Mega Man Battle Network, and that probably is what made me into a huge Mega Man fan overall. But just getting the sequel to it like less than a year later, and again, it literally comes out right before school ends for the summer. So I'm just like, oh, I got all summer to play this. This game's great. I feel great.
Hmm.
It's just like a distinct memory. Like anytime I got a game like right at the beginning of summer, it just always stuck out in my mind. And yeah, I mean that pretty much continued all the way through both the DS and continued through the DS era. Obviously, when the 3DS hit, life was a bit different then. But yeah, most of my memories are just like very good nostalgic feelings over like the specific day that I got like a game rather than like any specific event playing them.
Yeah. All right. Those are some very good memories too. So I got a couple of myself. So, some of my favorite memories were like I still remember Christmas 2000. That was when both my brother and I each got copies of Pokemon Gold and Silver. He got gold and I got silver. Um, and I remember like we just kept playing them like every day, like just until like we both like beat the Elite Four, beat the Pokemon League, and then we just the moment that like I was able to go from Johto to Kanto, I just couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it at the time because I never thought that like they would connect the two together. But that game, the biggest moment that really shook me was like when I went to Mount Silver and I went all the way to the end and I fought like Red and I was like, wait, that's me. That's my character from the first game. And I'm like, what? And like that was a very interesting battle. And after that I was like, yeah, like and like just the revelations that you actually get to fight against like your a version of yourself from the previous game with the version of yourself from the current game, like just that battle was amazing to me. That's definitely like one of my favorite memories. Another one was around the time when like and like most of these will be from the Game Boy Advance era because I remember this a lot. I remember them a lot more clearly. I remember going to the Pokemon Center the day that I went to the Pokemon Center like a few days before Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire released because they released it early if you went to Pokemon Center. So I got Ruby, my brother got Sapphire, and everybody was just playing it. Everyone was just seeing everybody starting off at the same time with whatever starter they went with. And then that's when we were learning about natures, when we were learning about Pokemon having abilities and all that stuff. It was really cool. Like everybody was just getting whatever Pokemon, and people were asking each other if you got this Pokemon or that Pokemon. They were having a party in there, both outside and inside. Like they had music being played, and outside, like people were just getting a lot of free stuff. People were just playing the game, and we had fun. We had a lot of fun that time. I also remember they did a similar event the following year when Pokemon Fire Red and Leaf Green came out. and they released those games here about like a few days early. Like it was a Saturday that we got them, and everyone else had to wait till I think Monday or Tuesday to get those games. But I remember just playing them both. Like my brother had Leaf Green, I had Fire Red, because my brother probably would have got Water Blue if that would have existed, but Leaf Green it is for him. But
Water Blue.
even though I'm the one that likes Blastoise, but my brother's content with it because he like his favorite starter from Gen 1 is Venusaur, so that worked out for him. But yeah, like we just played a lot of Fire and Leaf Green, especially with the fact that it came with the wireless link cable, which that's what they launched it with. And I remember I was like in my mind, like, man, I can't wait for all these games to have like the wireless link cable. But the support didn't last long because Nintendo would release the DS and that already had wireless built in. So there was that. But yeah, another memory I'll mention regarding Game Boy Advance or just Game Boy in general for me. I remember also like just the first time that I've actually got like what was it? It was around the time of the blackout 2003 in New York, New Jersey,
Right,
and all
I
that.
remember that. Yep.
I was trying to figure out what Game Boy Advance game was I playing back then. That's not Pokemon. Or it might have just been Pokemon. No, it was Pokemon, but it wasn't like Ruby and Sapphire. But I remember just playing a lot of Pokemon Pinball. I was playing WarioWare because but funny enough, like when I finished 10th grade, WarioWare came out, and what happened was that I just asked my mom for it because I finished school, and she just got it for me. Like it's one of those things where you just did not expect your parents to be like, oh, sure. Like you expect them to be like, no, you're gonna have to wait a little while. And she just went to a store, got it for me, and then I just played WarioWare. Like I just could not get enough of the original WarioWare in Game Boy Color. I spent so much time on it.
I will say this about the blackout. I feel bad for all of the systems now that have to be charged with a lithium ion because the Game Boy, if you had double A's on you, you were set. You were fine.
Yeah.
No matter what. As long as you had double A batteries, you were set. Not have to worry about charging.
Yeah. Like yeah.
Amazing.
And to think that day, like we were actually thinking about going outside, but good thing we didn't. But
it was a hot day too.
I
remember that day. I went to my friend's house in Brooklyn that night, and the pizza oven was still going because it was a brick oven run by some kind of like back burner or whatever, and they kept making pizzas for people, so they have food for the evening.
Like I think what it was is that I think it was the fact that we almost wanted to go to Manhattan. We want to go to the Pokemon Center because my brother wanted to see if there was anyone we know that was there at the time, but we didn't. Like my mom was like, nah, I want to stay home today. I'm like, okay, we'll stay home, we'll go another day. And really glad we stood home that day.
Oh yeah
but
good luck getting back.
But yeah, like but yeah, I play on my Game Boy Advance up until like when battery was running out, which ran out like that night, so I had to wait till the next morning to get batteries. But yeah, I just don't remember what game I was playing. It was either WarioWare or Pokemon Pinball. But yeah, those are my memories regarding
Great.
Game Boy.
Yeah, that blackout one, I'm telling you that.
But
everybody in New York remembers that.
But there was a lot of Pokemon when it comes to memories in general, like tons and tons of Pokemon. Over the years.
Yeah, and the fact that it was released 9 years after the system's initial release, and you get this resurgence in a system that is it's unheard of back then.
Game Boy was practically dead in the United States around that time. It was not doing well anymore, and then
Pokemon just boom like that.
Yeah, it just gained momentum, and then Nintendo handhelds have gained a lot more momentum ever since. Even with now.
Yep.
So, The next question I'll ask you first, Michael. What are some of your favorite games on the Game Boy Color, and Game Boy Advance?
Oh, that's a tough one because I've played so many of them. I mean, you can't beat classic Tetris. All the speculation about that game being the system seller it was would be is totally justified because it was addictive. I think that was probably my first or second Game Boy game along with Mario Land,
Yep.
which at the time Mario Land was a big deal, but nowadays I kind of look back on it, I'm like, it's a fun game for single playthrough. I don't think I'd go play through it more than once a year or something. But what else? The Wario Land games definitely stick out as like games that I always really liked. Like going from actually I didn't have Mario 2, but going from Mario Land to then Wario 1 was like such a huge jump up in like quality, and then 2, 3, and 4 coming out afterwards. It was just like it just felt like it kept getting better. 4 maybe went a little more on the experimental side with it, with the shift towards how modern Wario games were done, but they were all great. I believe the Game Boy was how I first experienced Mega Man. I played Mega Man 2 in the Game Boy, like Mega Man 2 Game Boy, which, as you know, it's a much different game than Mega Man 2 on the NES, and it's arguably probably the worst Game Boy Mega Man, but I still
Yeah.
loved it. But as I mentioned earlier, it wasn't until the Battle Network series that I like really got hardcore into Mega Man. All 6 of those games, the fact that again 5 out of 6 of them came out like right around when I would get a game as a gift, so I'd get them like at release every year. It just made it like really easy for me to get the series and get into it. I had so much fun with the entire series, even at its lowest points in like Battle Network 4. As anyone who's played that probably knows, it's like not the best game, but I had so many fond memories of that, and it just it just sticks out in my mind as like probably my overall favorite series from the Game Boy era.
Mm-hmm.
Golden Sun 1 and 2 are classic RPGs. I highly recommend playing those on Switch Online, actually, if you have the expansion pass, because they made it very easy to transfer data between the two games. You don't need a link cable or a password. You could just load up the save file, and I think it just brings it over for you,
Yeah.
which is really cool. But just the fact, just that fact back then that there were these two big RPGs on the Game Boy, which looked gorgeous, by the way. They used transparency layers in a very neat way to make that like kind of pseudo 3D battle scene thing that the game has, and it's really cool. The fact that you can beat the first game and then like you could transfer all your data over to the next game and just have all your items and character levels there when you finally like run into the people from the first game was just such a cool concept that you didn't really see being done a lot at the time, especially with handheld games.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, there's a couple other like standout one-offs here and there. I remember really liking original Game Boy Golf, not Mario Golf, but like the original Golf
Mm-hmm.
that just kind of had Mario there. I don't know. I just have very fond memories of the music and the I can't remember if it was 9 or 18 holes, but the two distinct courses they had for it. The original Game and Watch Gallery was a game I spent a lot of time playing.
Yes,
Yep.
same.
Of course, every Pokemon game can easily fall in there as well. A big wow moment for me, I would say the last one worth really mentioning here. A big wow moment for me was definitely Super Mario Advance 3 on GBA. Just having Yoshi's Island portable and like fully featured with extra levels was such a huge deal to me because I did not own Yoshi's Island on the SNES. I only ever borrowed it from a friend, and I'm like, oh, cool! Now I actually have the game for myself, and it's portable.
Yep.
That's so cool. And it's just like thinking back on it, it still blows my mind how much fun I had with those games, with that game specifically.
Yep. What about you, Jeremy?
Holy Toledo, here we go. Okay, let's go from start to finish. Let's go through the ages. Okay, so Game Boy, which also is Game Boy Pocket and of course Game Boy Color. For the Game Boy, I have a lot of fond memories of playing the Ninja Turtles games on Game Boy, both 1 and 2. I never owned 3, Radical Rescue, but the first 2 Game Boy games for Ninja Turtles, those were fun. Those were like games I was like, oh, these are games I can just pick up and play. These are great. Mighty Morphin Power Rangers was another game for the Game Boy that I remember playing a lot of. I was never really big on Power Rangers, but I just kind of followed the fad for like a year or so. But that was a fun game. Paperboy was one of those games where I was like, I just want to get good at this game. I was like 5, and I was just like, I feel like I want to like sell papers to people. So
Yeah.
that's the thing of the past now. I remember having Dr. Wily's Revenge and Mega Man 2 as well for the Game Boy. Those were notoriously difficult because the sprites had to be so big you just couldn't see like a bunch of things coming, and the power that you had in Mega Man was less on the Game Boy than it was on NES, so it was a more difficult challenge. I'm gonna cheat a little bit actually. I remember when the 3DS started to put out the Game Boy games on their Virtual Console service, and I was finally able to play Mega Man 5 on the Game Boy for the first time. That became one of my favorite Mega Man games. I really enjoy 5 on the Game Boy.
Yeah,
And
that's
to
a good
say
one.
that, like, as a grown up, I'm like, oh man, I really wish I had this when I was a kid. Because the story, the originality of it, just specifically for the Game Boy, great Mega Man game. I highly recommend it. No questions asked. If you have NSO, go for it. Another Game Boy game. Oh, Kirby's Dream Land. That I remember distinctly playing in my parents' backyard out in like a hot summer day in '92 and being like, this is the greatest platformer ever created. Oh, this is a game I can beat? Like, Masahiro Sakurai took platforming and said, okay, we're putting it on this game. We're putting it on this console where grandmothers in Texas are sitting in their favorite chair for 7 hours playing just Tetris. Let's make an accessible platforming game. And Masahiro Sakurai answers the call with Kirby. Like, that was the most fun platforming game I had played in my childhood that didn't offer too difficult of a challenge for me. Of course, unless you beat the game and figure out how to do extra mode, but I digress. Kirby, yes. So those are just some of my favorite games that I can think of off the top of my head. I would be remiss if I didn't mention the 2 Mario Land games. I never owned Wario Land, so I never really got into the Wario Land series as a result because I never had that first game. So it took me a little bit of coaxing to try it out on NSO, and after playing that and then having Wario Land 4 being gifted to me as one of the first buyers of the 3DS, you know, when they did that whole like rollback, oh, hey, we're cutting the price, but we're going to give you these 10 Game Boy Advance games. So now I have a found appreciation for the Wario Land series after trying Super Mario Land 3 for the first time.
Hmm.
But yeah, 6 Golden Coins, great Game Boy game. I will die on a hill and say that's one of the greatest portable platformers ever created. Moving along, Game Boy Color. I did not own a lot of Game Boy. Oh, sorry, I gotta go back. Donkey Kong. Let me just say this. I wanted to get Donkey Kong for the Game Boy, but after seeing the advertising, I was like, oh, we're just gonna play like Donkey Kong like the arcade. I don't really know if this is worth it or whatever. I should have got it because now it's one of my top 20 favorite games. I love Donkey Kong for the Game Boy, and I wish I was able to play it on this at the time.
Yeah.
Because looking at video footage of people playing it on their Super Game Boy with the surrounding border and the Super Game Boy actually being able to show all the different colors and make it look like an NES game. They knew what they were doing. This was awesome. I loved my Super Game Boy. And it's literally just a Game Boy in a cartridge without the screen.
Yeah.
And that's all this is. It's the whole system without the screen. So being able to play that on big screen was awesome. Game Boy Color, I really only owned Donkey Kong Country when they brought it like into an 8-bit kind of thing. Not Donkey Kong Land, Donkey Kong Country. But Super Mario Brothers Deluxe was amazing to play on the go. Game Boy Advance. So Game Boy Advance, to be able to play my favorite game of all time, Super Mario World, which was Super Mario Advance 2 on the go, was a dream come true. And to be able to play as both brothers, switching whenever you want, and actually have a tracker of not only if you collected all of the dragon coins, but also who completed the level and how fast you played and beat the game in game time. That was awesome. Like I couldn't have asked for anything better. Pokemon, of course. Pokemon Fire Red was a lot of fun. I have here all of my Game Boy Advance games. All of my Mario games are in the back here. Superstar Saga, Mario and Luigi, such a fun game.
Yep.
Definitely great for an RPG on the go. Um, Mario Pinball Land was fun. I'm more of a Pokemon pinball person. I still play it here from time to time. Just looking at my collection, Sonic Advance, to have a Sonic game on the go on your Nintendo system was like it was not quantifiable to our feeble minds who grew up during a console war.
Yeah.
So that was awesome. The two Metroid games, both Fusion and Zero Mission, were just fantastic games. Fusion, I love, but Zero Mission, to be able to go back and replay the first Metroid game with all of the added bells and whistles of having a Zero Suit Samus at the end. Spoiler alert, sorry. That was a lot of fun. The ports that I got were great. Mega Man and Bass, to be able to play that and not have it be released on this Super Nintendo here in the States and have it exclusively as a Game Boy Advance game. Such fun. Such a great time. But I will say, though, that for my favorite games to be on the Game Boy were, at the time, to be able to play all of the NES games on the go. Like, it was a dream come true to me. I was like, oh my gosh, having this beautiful clamshell and having grown adults on the subway look at this 16-year-old kid and be like, what Game Boy is this? And you give them the NES looking clamshell with the NES controller playing Super Mario Brothers on the go. They're like, what sorcery is this? So I had businessmen in suits like looking over my shoulder and being like, can I try? So yeah, definitely pretty awesome. And I will always be a Game Boy Micro apologist because I love the Game Boy Micro. I like how it feels. I love that I was able to fit it in my pocket. I could take it anywhere. It wasn't the bulky brick that we had when it released. So yeah, those are just some of my favorite games. Great times.
Yeah. So for me, like my favorite games on each of the platforms, for Game Boy, one of my all-time favorite games on that is The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening, which also extends to Game Boy Color because the DX version, because it has the full color and it added an extra dungeon to the game. I also would say Super Mario Land 2, 6 Golden Coins is up there. And the original Wario Land is definitely up there for me for Game Boy. Whereas Wario Land 2 is on Game Boy Color on my end. I never finished Wario Land 3 or 4 for that matter.
The Game & Watch Gallery games I forgot to mention as well, like Michael said, but Game & Watch Gallery 2 was my like game of choice for like vacation time.
Yeah, 3 was mine because I rented that from Blockbuster years ago, and that's the one that I've spent the most time on out of the Game & Watch Gallery games. Pokemon, of course, like for Game Boy, obviously like Red and Blue, but specifically the yellow version, mainly because there's more Pokemon that you can get in there. There's quite a few that weren't in Pokemon Yellow that you needed to trade from Red or Blue to it, but I still had fun with it.
And there's more Pikachu.
Yeah, but like, but I didn't buy it for Pikachu. I bought it because like, I usually like to get the third versions. And for that extension, like, while yes, Pokemon Gold and Silver were great on Game Boy Color, it's Pokemon Crystal that I absolutely love the most because while it may be the same story, they did add more content. Like they had a new character named Yucine who is obsessed with the Pokemon Suicune. You could choose between a boy or a girl because it's the first one where you can actually do that. Also, like they added a battle tower, and with the battle tower, you could just be able to battle like these trainers with like some really top level Pokemon. The games themselves, like the fact that they were able to just cram everything in there and more on all 3 of these games is amazing. Especially with Pokemon Crystal, with that one being exclusive to Game Boy Color, whereas the other 2 were like you could play on the original Game Boy as well. I love Crystal. Let's see. for Game Boy, Mega Man 5, easily the best one. Like out of all the Mega Man games, the best one for sure. Honestly, I feel like if any of them got remakes, that's the one that deserves one, because I feel like that one stands out on its own compared to the other Game Boy games, because they just felt like derivative versions of like the NES games, but just on the Game Boy. But the way that they formatted like the first 4 games was basically like Dr. Wily's Revenge. You had 4 Robot Masters from Mega Man 1, beat them, and then you fight the 4 Robot Masters, like 4 of the Robot Masters from Mega Man 2. And then they would follow up the same trend. The 4 Robot Masters from Mega Man 2 that you didn't fight in the first game, and so on and so forth. They would do this up until like in Mega Man 4 on the Game Boy, where you had 4 different Robot Masters from 4, and 4 from Mega Man 5. I thought 5 would go the same trend, but nope. That was where they shifted it. The Star Droids, the Star Droids are easily some of the best villains in the game. Mm-hmm. The game was everything was. Honestly, I just could not recommend that game enough. Yeah, like NSO is really like the best way to play it right now. In terms of modern platforms, but that game is expensive.
And in terms of forgiveness in the rewind feature.
Yes. But that game is expensive. Other games I would say for Game Boy and Game Boy Color, before I get to Game Boy Advance, I absolutely enjoyed Metroid 2 Return of Samus. Even though obviously you have Samus Returns and it's a remake of that game, but I do enjoy Metroid 2 for what it was. It's better than Metroid 1 because at least you can be able to save in like the dedicated save spots, and Samus looks better. The game looks more detailed, even with the black and white. But it's still pretty challenging. And for Kirby, obviously Kirby's Dream Land, Kirby's Pinball Land. I didn't really get into Kirby's Dream Land too much. I didn't really enjoy that one.
Neither did I. I don't know about the helper characters. They were a little...
Oh, I love them, but
okay.
It's just that for me, like, because it was part of a trilogy of games. You have Kirby's Dream Land 2, 3, and 64, which was called the Dark Matter Trilogy. Wasn't really a fan of that. Like, they just felt so weird for Kirby. But in the case of Dreamland 2, it's definitely like one of my least favorite Kirby games. It's not a bad game, by the way. It's just couldn't get into that one. But for Game Boy Advance, that's where I can really name some of my all-time favorite games on there. Like you got Mega Man 03. Like the Zero series is fantastic.
It's great.
They're challenging. But they can be very punishing when it comes to like when you die, that you have to restart the mission. Like you have to restart the mission. But at the same time, the games are fun. 3 is my favorite one of the bunch, with 4 being a close second. Mega Man Battle Network series. Funny enough, I tried getting into it back when it was relevant on the GBA, but the first game just kept pushing me away because of how ridiculously slow it was.
Yeah, its first game's not very good.
Yes.
Yeah, that's also what pushed me away. That's why I didn't get the legacy collections of those games. It kind of pushed me out.
Well, so when I did get the collection, and then I finally got into it, and it's like, okay, I got through it. Let's see how Battle Network 2 is. And Battle Network 2 is a major improvement over the first one.
Okay.
And
that's why I have such good memories of getting it.
Yeah.
Like that day when I just started, I'm like, oh, this is already leagues better than how Battle Network 1 played.
It's like,
and I loved Battle Network 1 at the time. Like at the time, I thought it was like one of the best games I'd ever played.
Yeah.
So just seeing how much better it got was like such a huge thing for me.
Because with Battle Network 1, because that in Japan, it released on the exact same day and date with the Game Boy Advance. So it was a launch title in Japan. Because they got both Battle Network 1 and 2 in the same year. Whereas over here, we had to wait a year for Battle Network 2 to release. But
it was like 8 months or so.
Yeah.
It was because Battle Network 1, because Battle Network almost always came out in June in America, but Battle Network 1 was like November of the previous year or October of the previous year. So it was like a short wait, but then it was 1 year between each of the other games as well.
Yeah. Like for me, it's like I absolutely enjoyed the Battle Networks 2, 3, and the one that I'd say is my favorite in the series is now 6. Like Battle Network
Yeah,
6.
a lot of people, a lot of people jump on 6 being the best after a while. It's just the most fun to play with like other people because there's just so much strategy that you could use with how the chips are balanced in that game. It's definitely like the PvP game.
It really is. I've also played Metroid Fusion and Zero Mission, but Zero Mission to me is the better game in terms of like the gameplay. I loved Zero Mission a lot. Even though Fusion's a good game, I just felt like even though Zero Mission is just a remake of the first game, they added so much more to it that makes it feel like its own game. Like it feels like a brand new experience. For Pokemon, definitely Pokemon Emerald for sure. Because like even though Ruby and Sapphire are fantastic games, Emerald just makes it so much better. More with they added the battle because like they have Battle Tower in Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire, but they took it the extra mile and added Frontier in Emerald, so you can be able to have a lot more battle options. My favorite being the Battle Factory, where you have like 3 random Pokemon that you could choose from and use it as a team. But yeah, I spent so much time in Pokemon Emerald. Um, and then like there's also the Legend of Zelda Four Swords as well as A Link to the Past remake. I still have to play Minish Cap, by the way. I will get to that.
You know what? I have it
game.
here, and I haven't played it either. I still have to get to that Zelda game.
Yes.
It's an interesting game. It's like it kind of like I wouldn't say like I would almost guarantee that it's like not going to be on anyone's like top 3. Well, not top 3. Maybe it won't be. It's not going to be most people's like favorite Zelda game, but it is just a solid game all throughout.
Yeah.
And definitely recommend going through that when you get the chance.
And going back to Game Boy Color real quick, I still also have to do both of the Oracle games, like both Seasons and
right.
Ages. I have to do both of them at some point.
Yeah.
But
I think we would also be missing something important with this.
with Metroid 2 Return of Samus.
Yeah, we haven't even mentioned it. And
I did.
Metroid. Oh, yes, you did. You're right, Mike. I'm sorry. But yeah, I think we should
Shellshock, Shellshock.
Oh, sorry. I'm half asleep. That's why I have coffee.
It's all good.
The cool thing about that is that Metroid back on the NES was such a niche game. For it to come out on the Game Boy, it took that niche crowd and brought them in because they were like, "Oh, sci-fi from Nintendo, like let's go." But yeah, Metroid 2: Return of Samus was one of those games where if you wanted that kind of an NES exploratory feel, that was your game. Like a lot of people really enjoyed that kind of exploration. And to have that on a Game Boy, I mean, Ninja Turtles 3 Radical Rescue took it to the next level too. So you have these kinds of games where you're able to explore on a battery pack save game. Like that was almost unheard of.
Another Game Boy Advance game that I enjoyed, because the Game Boy Advance was the home to 3 different Metroidvania style Castlevania games. You had Circle of the Moon, Harmony of Dissonance, and Aria of Sorrow. Of the 3, I felt that Aria of Sorrow is the best one. Like Circle of the Moon was fine. It was a decent game. Harmony of Dissonance didn't really hit the mark with me, but Aria of Sorrow was so good. Like I felt that that was the one where I felt that they perfected the formula on the Game Boy Advance. Because they wanted to start capitalizing on what they had with simply than on a PlayStation, but just bring it to handheld, and it fit very well. Just being able to just play these games on the go just was amazing. And one other Game Boy Advance game that I need to bring up, because I could go on and on with this, but this is where I got into Fire Emblem because this is where Fire Emblem first released outside of Japan, and I got the first one where we had like it had Lynn, but like the first 10 chapters was basically a tutorial for those who never got a chance to play Fire Emblem before. Because it never released outside of Japan up to that point. And then like everything afterwards is basically like the real story to the game. Because like they just wanted to introduce you to the world first. Then they have like these characters who, because it was actually a prequel to the Fire Emblem that released before it, which would be the Binding Blade. And that's the one that had Roy, who many people know him from Super Smash Brothers Melee and onwards, that where he appeared in. Because I remember like not knowing what Fire Emblem was until Melee. So, and then when I found out that we were getting a Fire Emblem game, like I had to get it. That was one of my Christmas presents that year. That Fire Emblem game, alongside Mario and Luigi Superstar Saga, which is also a great game. And yeah, like Game Boy Advance had a very fantastic library of games that you can just play. But Super Mario Brothers 3 was a great Game Boy Advance game as well. Like out of all the Advance games, because you could just pop it in the Game Boy player on the GameCube, and the screen extends, so it's like if you're playing a Super Nintendo game. That's how good it is. So, yeah.
And it had those wonderful e-reader courses that thankfully they were able to include in both the Wii U and NSO.
Oh yeah, speaking of e-reader, thanks for reminding me about that.
Yes.
I had an e-reader. I used to scan the Pokemon cards, and I'm gonna bring up one commercial that stands out to me the most when it comes to e-reader. You see like a factory, you see Donkey Kong Jr. just getting squished. That's what stood out to me the most. Because like they used to have it so that you could just swipe the e-reader cards of the NES games, and you could play like Donkey Kong Jr., you could play Mario Brothers, or like some other NES games that they had available. And I thought it was a really nice feature that I was hoping they would do more of that, but instead they pivoted to the classic NES series, which made more sense to just, instead of just releasing them in cards, because you could easily lose them, you just have the cartridges. So at least that was a thing. And they stood out because the cartridges were gray. Well, at least the North American ones. I don't remember if the Japanese ones were like red, like for Famicom. I don't remember. But
were they yellow? Because I mean, I have a Mario Kart right behind me, and it was yellow. I don't know.
That might have been, yeah.
I'm not
Yeah.
sure. Could look that up.
Yeah. But yeah. Those are some of my favorite Game Boy games across the platforms. So
There's so many. There's like
too many.
Plethora. There's so many.
And the next question before we do the community topics, the community questions and all that, I'll start with you on this one, Jeremy.
Yeah.
Did Game Boy leave a lasting impact on you?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, look at what we have. We have the Switch. You know what I mean? Like, we've come full circle. The Game Boy, I think, if I were to nail its impact on me, I think it kept me sane. I mean, if you're thinking in terms of, you know, being around family events or at the restaurant and you're just like bored, you don't want to hear the adults talk, you know what I mean? Like you just kind of hide in your own corner. A lot of people would say, bring a book. I'm fine with that. You know what I mean? I can get behind that argument. Bring a book.
Yeah.
But for the Game Boy, I think it was just a matter of the promise of technology improving. You know, you all of a sudden you're able to play Super NES style games on a Game Boy. Then you get the DS and you're able to play N64 style games. And then you just keep thinking to yourself, wow, I wonder where it'll take us. 2017 answers the call with the Switch. And we're just like, oh, well, here we go. This is it.
Yep.
This is where we've come to. So I think for me, the impact of Game Boy, I mean, look at what I have. You know what I mean? Like, look at this. I'll show you the impact. There's a bag that is specifically designed to hold your Game Boy, hold games, extras, and then carry what other stuff you want to with you.
Yep.
You know, like it's meant to be carried with you. It's meant to be taken with you. It's meant for you to have the opportunity to not, if you can't watch, okay, let me go back up. Kids today have a very difficult time attempting to play Game Boy games. I have a hard time attempting to play Game Gear games. Like, I understand that. It feels a little bit esoteric now. But for then, we weren't able to watch movies on our phones. We weren't able to watch television shows wherever we wanted. The ability to be able to take our favorite characters with us on the go in animated form was the Game Boy. Animaniacs, Ninja Turtles, Power Rangers, movie tie-ins, like all of that was able to be taken with you. So if you couldn't watch your favorite film at the time, you played, I don't know, as tough as it was, you played Lion King on Game Boy. There's just something fun and exciting about being able to see your favorite characters in motion and be able to tell them what to do on the go in a time where you couldn't watch your favorite shows or movies wherever you wanted, whenever you wanted. When the Game Boy Advance came out with the video cartridges, that was revolutionary for us as kids. We were like, you mean I can watch an episode of Pokemon like wherever I want, whenever I want? Sign me up. There's something magical about it. So that impact, I think, allowed game developers to keep pushing the boundary and saying, I wonder what more we can put into this system. I wonder what we can do. And of course, we get the Switch and we get Steam Deck. You know, like all of it's there. All of the people who are developing that now are our age. They grew up with us. So they knew the capability. They understood the potential. That impact of bringing our favorite characters and worlds anywhere we went with us, bar none, I would take with me wherever I go. If I were to be like, hey, look, if I'm kicking it tomorrow, just pack me with a Game Boy Micro and Super Mario Advance 2 Super Mario World, and I'll take it up to St. Peter and be like, hey, look, get a load of this. So
Yep.
that's the reach of my impact with Game Boy. It is far reaching and it's all encompassing. My son and my daughter like to play my Game Boy games. My son, I was bringing these down to the basement earlier, and he was like, "Oh my gosh, I want to play this." I'm like, "Go ahead, here's Tetris."
All right.
Perfect.
All right. That's awesome. What about you, Michael?
I mean, I would say the Game Boy has left a pretty gigantic impact on my own life. I mean, as I mentioned, would not have been, without it, we wouldn't have Pokemon. I would not have become a hardcore Mega Man fan.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe I would have, but it wasn't. If it wasn't for Battle Network, it wouldn't have happened when it did. When I think back to not a little less so when the Super NES era hit, but when I think back to the games that I remember most fondly for the NES and the N64 eras, it's almost always going to be Game Boy and Game Boy Color first before the consoles. SNES, on the other hand, might be a little more balanced the other way, but when I think back to favorite games, favorite soundtracks, favorite favorite anything of video games back then, it was almost always going to be a Game Boy game topping any sort of NES or N64 game. So I feel like the consoles definitely left a huge imprint on my tastes. I'm very much, when I see retro style modern games, indie games and stuff like that, I very much appreciate more of the Game Boy emulating ones rather than the NES emulating ones. I would say the upcoming Mina the Hollower looks very Game Boy Colorish, and that's already super appealing to me.
Yeah.
I enjoyed Shovel Knight a lot with its NES kind of NES leaning graphics, but this is just this aesthetic is just appealing to me on a different level. So I would say that just the graphic style, the sound style, everything from back then just influences my tastes all the way up till today.
Yep. Awesome. So for me, it's basically that I loved playing all these games on the go, and just that feeling of being able to take them with you no matter where you went was incredible. Like, so many memories playing Game Boy, Game Boy Color, and Game Boy Advance games, to a point where I just love playing Pokemon, like especially peak Pokemania back in the late 90s, early 2000s, where everybody was just playing Pokemon. Everybody, like, in school, like during lunch, or like when we have recess, there are times where some kids would just not really like partake in the traditional recess activities. Instead, they're just playing Game Boy games. They're just playing Pokemon, trading, battling. And when you battle back in 1999, there'll be that one kid that is beating every other kid in the school because he had a team of 6 Mewtwo's that are very powerful. So unless you had like unless your Beedrill for whatever reason is fast enough to be able to use Twin Needle, because that was actually the strongest bug type move, or if you had a Jolteon that knew how to use it, good luck beating those Mewtwo's. You have to outspeed it, and even then, Twin Needle wasn't even that strong of a move. It's just you had to hope that it hit 5 times to beat Mewtwo. At least in Gold and Silver, they rebalanced it so that they added more bug moves, and there was a glitch in which Ghost type moves in Red, Blue, and Yellow do not affect Psychic types. That was a glitch. That was not supposed to be like that. But
Really?
in Gold and Silver, they fixed it so that Psychic are weak to Ghosts. And also, that's when they had the special attack and special defense split so that Mewtwo would be better balanced and he would not be that broken. But yeah, just being able to transfer your Pokemon, like back in the day, like in Pokemon Stadium, and you just plug in your transfer pack to your N64 controller, and then put the game in there, whichever game you want. Transfer your Pokemon, seeing them in 3D battling each other was surreal. Like it's like you're watching like some sort of competition, like between like people in the room just playing against each other or Pokemon. Like just the power of the Game Boy, like Game Boy Advance, just the jump from what we knew of Game Boy and Game Boy Color all the way to Game Boy Advance with so much improvement over the graphics, the sounds, and the type of games we were gonna get that you could not do. Because like this is where we were getting Mario Kart on the go. You couldn't do that on Game Boy, Game Boy Color, but on Game Boy Advance you could. This is where we would get like the 2D Marios were just the ports. Like we did not get an original 2D Mario on Game Boy Advance, sadly, but we did get a new Zelda game. We did get a new Metroid as well as a remake of the first game. We got some Kirby games. We got Pokemon was amazing. A huge improvement over Red and Blue and Gold and Silver. Seeing the rise of the rise of the Battle Network series, the rise of Yu-Gi-Oh! Around that time. Not to mention, like, just seeing, like, all these games. The reason that it left an impact towards me is because of just the fact that I could just play these games on the go. Especially, like, when they're just getting better and better each generation. I'm like, yes, let's do it. Like, and I was like in my mind, okay, well, the next Game Boy, let's see if they do it N64 style. But it ended up being the DS, and it did have 3D graphics, and it had Super Mario 64 DS, but DS is another story right there, and I'll definitely get to that in the future. But Game Boy means a lot to me because of the fact that I could just take it anywhere and create new memories with it. So yeah, let's do community questions. This one's from my buddy Steven, Nintendo. What's the most technologically impressive game you have played on each Game Boy iteration? Like, So Game Boy for me, technologically impressive. I'm going to have to say for Game Boy, I remember seeing Zelda Link's Awakening for the first time on there, and I was like, how could the Game Boy pull something like this off? Well, it looks so good on Game Boy. Like I just thought that it was like a Super Nintendo style game brought over to the Game Boy. Because when I looked at the original Legend of Zelda, that game looked so blocky in comparison, whereas this looks so crisp. It looked amazing. Game Boy Color, Pokemon Gold, Silver, and Crystal. Because you have to give Satoru Iwata all the credit because he was the one who was brought in to be able to compress the game just to be able to fit both Johto and Kanto together all in one. The fact that he was able to do that was amazing. So, mad props to him for that. So Game Boy Advance, technologically speaking, that one's a hard one for me to pick because there's some really good looking games on the Game Boy Advance, but I think there was a Doom port on Game Boy Advance that looked really good. That one's harder for me to pick because there are some really good looking games on Game Boy Advance, but in terms of technologically impressive, that's hard. Like,
I
what
might
do you...
have an answer for that.
All right.
I think for the original Game Boy, pre-color, Donkey Kong Land. I think to be able to do parallax scrolling with 3D models from a Super Nintendo game onto a Game Boy, that's difficult. Like, you had to understand how to properly compress those sprites and still be able to keep form-fitting pixels as well as the environment and have it be distinctive between the two. Like, that's very difficult. So I would definitely say Donkey Kong Land is a pretty impressive technical feat for the Game Boy, especially in 94, 95? That's pretty crazy. Game Boy Advance, Golden Sun. I mean, when you get those wraparounds and you get the way that things morph, a la Mode 7, if you will, I think that it enhanced the storytelling of Golden Sun to be able to do what those games did, both of them. So yeah, I think off of the top of my head, those would be 2, 3 of the most impressive. And to be able to do on the Game Boy Color, Donkey Kong Country was impressive, but I think being able to have Donkey Kong Land on the Game Boy and then the Golden Sun games show us how the Game Boy Advance can really be executed in its graphical style. That would be my answer.
All right. Michael?
When I think technologically impressive, I don't necessarily go for the graphics or like the amount of content in the game. I tend to think of stuff that involved like extra kinds of feedback or inputs that you wouldn't normally see in the Game Boy. So my answers are going to be pretty similar in execution, but like they're vastly different games. For the Game Boy, the original Game Boy, even though this was enhanced for Game Boy Color, I'm still going to count it as an original Game Boy game because that's what I got it on first. Pokemon Pinball, just being able to have like a battery backed rumble feature on a Game Boy game was very interesting. Having it like actually like accurately like rumble when you like tilt the screen, when you tilt the boards, when you like whack the ball around. It was really cool. It was like a gimmick. It was a gimmick, but it was really fun and added like a little extra level of immersion. And I believe that was, I don't know if that was around the same time. No, it was when Pokemon. So yeah, it was after the Rumble Pack had already come out in the N64.
Yeah.
So it was cool to just get that experience also on a handheld as well. And taking that a step in a different direction, instead of the game providing extra feedback, a different way of controlling the games. For Game Boy Color, Kirby's Tilt and Tumble was definitely one that stood out to me, just because it was in this like neat, a bright pink cartridge, transparent cartridge. The way you had to like play it by holding the Game Boy Color like flat and then flipping it up to jump and stuff. That was such a fun, unique way of playing a game that like it was essentially like at the time, like that was my first exposure to any sort of motion controlled video game, and it sticks out in my mind. Like the game itself wasn't wouldn't be super memorable if it wasn't for the fact that it has such a unique control scheme. And I'm so glad that the Switch version of the game still includes that on the for both the controls and the system.
Yep.
And then on a similar note, for Game Boy Advance, WarioWare Twisted, that came the fact that came in such like a big like bulky cartridge was already kind of a weird thing, but like then the fact that thing had like a rumble motor and an accelerometer on the inside that detected your tilts was such a unique thing. And again, it's so cool that they're able to still do that now. Like the 3DS and the Switch, you could just use the console's accelerometer to replicate those tilt games.
Yeah.
And I just thought that all that was like really cool. It really like went in a different direction with how you would expect games to be played. And it's interesting to see like how that all may have influenced stuff from like the Wii on, when Nintendo kind of made all that stuff stock standard in their games, having motion controls and Rumble. Though I guess Rumble really became more standard around the GameCube era, but still, it's really cool that all that all that impressive technology back then has become standard in consoles now. So I think it's really cool that a lot of that was possible on a system, as early back as the Game Boy Advance, the Game Boy Color, and the Game Boy.
Mm-hmm.
That's a great answer.
Yep.
Yeah. And of course, I'm going to throw shout outs to, again, Golden Sun is one of my favorite visually impressive GBA games. Pokemon Gold, Silver, and Crystal for having the both regions in it, just being such a packed game. I definitely got to give special consideration to those as well.
So the next question is for Noble Boy. Which of the 3 Game Boy entries had the best launch lineup? So obviously, like the original Game Boy had Tetris, and that alone definitely helped a lot.
It changed the world.
It changed the world. But in terms of overall quality for a Game Boy launch lineup, I'm gonna have to go with Game Boy Advance. Like they really packed a lot of quality games within that launch period. Like if you count the Japanese launch, you had Mega Man Battle Network 1 on there.
Yeah,
Got them all right in here.
Yep. Like
I only played Mario Advance 2, or Mario Advance and Tony Hawk 2 on launch, and I didn't get another game until Mario Kart Super Circuit. So for me personally, the launch for it felt very light, but at the same time, that was a point in my life where I was only getting like 2 games every like 4 or 5 months. So I still had more than enough to play during all that.
yeah.
Yeah, so right here I have Super Mario Advance, F-Zero Maximum Velocity,
Mhm.
Rayman Advance, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2, Castlevania Circle of the Moon, and then they have a buyer's guide. Like that's a pretty stacked lineup. We already talked about 3 out of those 5 games anyway.
Yep.
That's a game I'm not going to mention here. Super Dodgeball Advance, Pinobi Wings of Adventure. I'm just kind of reading off like some of these launch title games. DT Advanced Gaming Championship Racing, Bomberman Tournament, Ready to Rumble Boxing Round 2. Pitfall, The Mayan Adventure.
Ooh.
To have Pitfall going on the go like that.
Yeah.
Top Gear GT Championship. Army Men Advance, Choo Choo Rocket.
Yeah, Choo Choo Rocket.
Konami Crazy Racers.
Yeah.
So I mean, you've got a great lineup of games. So I would definitely say Game Boy Advance, like hands down for a launch. Because what did it have on the original Game Boy? We had Tetris, Mario Land, Alleyway, tennis.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2. I'm like, all right,
Yeah.
go. Yeah.
Let's see. So, next one's from Charlotte. If any one Game Boy game gets ported or remade or remastered for the Switch 2, which would you want it to be? I would personally want them to remake The Legend of Zelda, Oracle of Ages and Seasons in the same way that they remade Link's Awakening. And I was thinking that was what they were going to do after the Link's Awakening remake, but they surprised us with Echoes of Wisdom, which is a fantastic game.
Oh, I love it.
So that's my answer.
Okay.
Remakes of Oracle of Seasons and Ages.
Cool. Good answer.
I think I'd go with I have a bit of an oddball choice, and I cannot believe I forgot to mention this in like when we were talking about like favorite Game Boy games. There was a game it was kind of like a small passion project by Miyamoto. And I think it ran off the Link's Awakening engine, or it used a very similar engine. It's called Mole Mania for Game
Oh
Boy,
yeah, that's
and
right, Mole Media.
it is a like screen by screen puzzle game with a unique gimmick where you can dig underground and you essentially have like two screens, two layers for every screen. It is such a fun game. I got it on a whim like one time when my family like took me to Funko Land back when that was still in business. And that game is not on NSO, oddly enough. Like, I mean, I know the Game Boy
Wow.
selections on there is not super fleshed out yet, but if that's like a hint that that maybe some kind of like 3D remake of that game happening, that would be amazing. It would be such an out of left field choice, and I would love to see Nintendo's like modern take on
Mole
Mole Mania.
Mania. You just
Yep.
unlocked Pandora's box for
It
me.
is one of
Mole
my favorite Game
Mania.
Boy games. Actually,
Wow. I gotta look that up now. I gotta look at
I
that.
got it used, so it didn't come with the box, but I actually went out of my way and bought like a plastic repro box just to hold it because I
Look
love
at
it so
that.
much. One of my
Awesome.
favorites.
Oh my gosh, that's great. Oh wow, Mole Mania. Holy moly. No pun intended. Pun intended.
The double pun because it has holes and
Gosh,
moles.
that's great. Wow. Okay. For me, gosh, oh man, I read. Okay, I will say this: the DS and the 3DS had cameras on them.
Yeah.
It's fine. We all have smartphones that can do these crazy, amazing, awesome things. It's fine. But I gotta tell you, I mean, this thing that I have here is my original Game Boy like holder. Like this is from '89. This was the original Game Boy holder with the handle and everything. Inside of here, I have my Game Boy camera and my Game Boy printer. I still
Nice.
have them. I have a feeling that if the Switch 2 had a camera on it, it could have we could have had something really special going with that. That's like my dream answer. My dream answer would be like if Nintendo did I'll look for that later. If Nintendo did cameras like right, I feel like we could have a lot of fun like Nintendo, like weird Nintendo. You know what I'm talking about? Like when I say
Mhm.
weird Nintendo, like
Yeah.
you know the just off-color jokes and the visuals like that they kind of stick in the Wario games now. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like weird Nintendo. I think that would have been so cool to have as a remake for like Nintendo Switch or Nintendo Switch 2.
Yeah.
That's my dream answer.
Yeah.
My more realistic answer, gosh, any games that I would like to see remade or remastered from the Game Boy? Oh man, Michael, you hit the nail on the head with Mole Mania. That's hard to
Yeah.
follow up. Gosh. All right, I'm really gonna think about this right now. Off the top of my head, I would say the Mario Land games redone in Mario Wonder style.
Mm. All
I
right.
would like to see that as like a full story with like added places to go, like a world like a kind of like a world traveling tour in a way, you know, like Mario goes out and travels the world, you know, cuz all those different kingdoms were based off of real places. You know, like Muda Kingdom and all that. So have him go like on this little world tour and then he like helps save the world or whatever, Sarasa Land, and then he goes back home and Wario took over. Like, wouldn't that be great to just have like as a like a 1-2 punch in a Mario Wonder style? Because it is kind of quirky. You know, Miyamoto didn't work on that first Mario Land game. So having that in a Wonder style, I think would be pretty cool to kind of flash back to that. I think
Yeah.
they could do really cool things with it. But yeah, I can't really think of anything other than that at the moment. But chat, if you have any games that you would love to see remade or remastered, I would love to hear about them because I think that now with the way the technology is, anything's possible, especially from something as the Game Boy and Game Boy Advance. Anything's up for grabs, but if we were to like remake or remaster, I would love to see those first two Mario Land games like remade in a Wonder style. That'd be really cool.
All right. That's a very interesting one. So let's see. So next up is from H Bomb. What is the coolest place you've taken your Game Boy? Oh, let's see. I gotta
Under
think
the
about.
sheets. Ooh.
Well, coolest place. Damn, I gotta really think about that one. I'm probably if I'm probably gonna have to go with. There was this time that I remember. Crap. What was it like? I'll let you guys go, and then I'll get back to myself afterwards. So, whichever one you guys want to go with, go right ahead.
Okay. Favorite place I ever brought my Game Boy. Wow, that's a good question.
It's
Oh.
hard for me to answer this because I did not travel a lot prior to like the DS era. Like any
Yeah, I
travel I
didn't
did
do a
was
lot
just
of
with my
traveling
family.
either.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
I
I
really
mean,
did not bring any of my Game Boy systems like ridiculously cool or anything. Um, I yeah, I actually don't have an answer for this.
Yeah, like to be honest with you,
I-
the same thing for me for the simple fact that I like most of my traveling like started like towards the tail end of the GBA era, and even then, it wasn't as eventful as it would be from DS era and onward. So, I'm gonna have to say that like
I have an answer.
I don't have an answer.
I have an answer. I think my first plane ride was to Walt Disney World in 1994, and I was able to bring my Game Boy with me for the plane ride. So being able to play my Game Boy like thousands of feet in the air was actually really cool. And then there was a trip that my family and I took to North Carolina where I was able to bring not only like a console with me, but I also brought my Game Boy. The house that we stayed in was it had this beautiful like rooftop where you can look out at the ocean. And at night, like you could see the sparkling of the water. I was playing Game and Watch Gallery a 2 on my Game Boy, like up on that roof with like salty sea air and seagulls and bugs and just the hearing of the crashing of the waves and the moonlight sparkling over the water. I was just like, look, if it doesn't get any better than this, it's fine, no problem. Just don't stop time, please. So yeah, I would say those are two of my favorite places that I've taken my Game Boy.
Playing my Game Boy on the beach when I'd go to like the beach we'd go to for a week every year, every summer, was just like this such something so nostalgic about it, just because it was the beginning of summer. And it was always like right after my birthday. I'd always have a new game to play. It was just really like it's just a memory that sticks out. But like I wouldn't say it's the coolest place I ever took my Game Boy. I also um took a trip in 2004 before the DS came out, and I brought my GBA with me then on the plane. And I mean, I guess if you consider that like a cool place, there you go. I mean, nowadays, you know, I the last couple I've been taking flights like 2 to 3 times a year, and I always have my Switch with me, even though I'm like not even really playing it sometimes. So it's you know it's just become standard now for me, really.
I'll probably say like when I went upstate New York back in '99 and 2000, and the reason I picked those years specifically was because my older brother lived there up until like the end, like close to the end of 2000. But the reason I picked those 2 years is because Pokemania, because especially like '99 2000, like Pokemon was
Running
so
rampant.
huge. So I would bring my Game Boy with me, my Game Boy Color. I was playing Pokemon Red and Blue around that time. 99, and then like in 2000 I was playing Yellow, and I was playing Pokemon trading card game because Gold and Silver did not release in the United States yet. They were coming, but they weren't out yet. But I guess that's my answer then. Going upstate New York during the peak of Pokemania. Next up is from Epic Man. If you had a Game Boy Color, which color did you have? If not, say which one would you want regardless. The one I had was the indigo one, and my brother had the translucent atomic purple Game Boy Color. That's my answer.
I think I had purple. That's what
I had
that's
berry, the berry like dark red, almost pinkish color. I was convinced that they came with the game, and they were advertising it alongside Super Mario Brothers Deluxe, and I really wanted it, which is funny because I never ended up getting that game. But yeah, I just got that model of GBC. I remember being asked like, "Do you really want that color?" I'm like, "Yeah, it looks nice. It's a little like weird. Like it's thinking back on it, it is a weird color. Like I would have honestly preferred getting like a bright pink one over the berry color. I feel like the berry color is kind of like this weird in between pink and red, and it looks kind of like dirty, like muddyish almost. But I mean, I'm also, when I look at my Game Boy Color, it's also a unit from like 20 something years ago. So it's not the way it was when it came out of the box.
Yeah,
That blue looks nice. I like that blue
it did.
because each of the I don't know if anybody can see it, but the colors that they show on the Game Boy Color symbol were the first 5 colors released for as a choice of color for the symbol. But
Yeah,
this blue at the end, that would have been really cool to own. I would have liked that.
yeah. Like for me, like I would have actually wanted the red one. It's just that released later on after like the purple one. Because the two that I remember seeing were the purple one and the atomic purple. But honestly, for me, like the one that did not gravitate towards me was like the green one. Like that one didn't really stick out to me that much compared to the other colors.
Not quite a lime green. It was like a little off.
It looked more like um a color that should not have been picked. That's all I'll say.
Yeah.
Um,
I very distinctly remember that commercial with the all 50 states of America being made out of
Yep,
Game Boy colors, and they were all the different
Right.
colors too,
yep,
and they were all like shaped like the states. It was a very interesting commercial. That was kind of like that, like one where it was like just the white background with like a character walking on. It was part of that series of commercials in
yeah.
like the very late 90s.
I,
Yep.
yep. And now here is a very interesting question. This one is from Professor Icepick. What was your favorite peripheral for the Game Boy? And I'm not talking about Game Genie or Link Cable. I mean those big honking pieces of plastic that people use to hook them up to them. And he posted a picture in the topic questions, like the example being like, there was like this one accessory where like you had like a joystick with like bigger buttons and it has like this flapping screen. Like you have like that also protects it from the sunlight, and also at the same time you can be able to see clearly. It's called the Handy Boy.
Yeah.
I've seen that before, and it is a very interesting design, but I didn't have one. So, but I'll tell you what I did have. In regards to peripherals, I used to have like those like peripherals where like you stick it into the link cable slot, and it's basically like a little flashlight that you're supposed to use to be able to get like some flashlight so you can be able to see within the light. Especially if you're on a car, like on road trips and all that stuff. To be honest, they were okay, but they weren't the end all be all. But that's basically what I had. But I didn't really have a lot of peripherals, so that's my answer.
I had a few over the course of the three systems. I would say the most notable one for me, and I'm looking at the Handy Boy here, and it's got like the speakers and the thing. I did have a version of that. I don't think it was the Handy Boy. It was like a cheaper, an even cheaper version of that. I was not a fan of it. The joystick and those big buttons, like they didn't really work very well in the Game Boy. But I did have a screen magnifier. That you would plug in and like you would hold it over, and it would also have like a bigger speaker on it, which made the sound a little better. And a light, and I remember that being an accessory that I used a lot. But I think overall the most used accessory that I had for the Game Boy through Game Boy Advance line was the Game Boy Color worm light, as you mentioned. My brother and I actually had matching gold and silver ones when Pokemon Gold and Silver came out, and that I actually got a fair bit of use from. It wasn't a great light. It didn't really light the screen up that much, but We definitely got some use out of it, and I remember it being like just kind of the go-to.
Yep.
Yeah. My Game Genies. Oh, I'm sorry, not Game Genies. Uh, this. This right here is my original Game Boy Game Light made by Nubby or Nubby.
That's the one I was talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, this you would it has a slot on the top that used to go all the way across, and you would if I may demonstrate quickly, I'm not going to actually insert it, but what you would do is you would slide it onto the top of the Game Boy and it would catch and it would hold it just like that. So I didn't have to worry about passing street lights when I was in the car. I could just use this. So yeah, this would probably be my favorite accessory nostalgically. For my Game Boy Advance, I know I still have it, but I couldn't find it before this broadcast. I used to have one of those clamshell attachments that also protected the screen, and when you lift it up, it was also a light. So I had one of those that I would clamp down on it. That was another favorite accessory of mine. Um, and I would say another accessory that I had. I don't remember there being I don't remember there being any like crazy like accessory that I owned that like enhanced my system. Um so I would say like just those two, just the clamshell and the light would probably be best for me because I wanted to play my games in the dark. Let's be real. I just wanted to play, what I owned wherever I went without having to worry about, not being able to see. So yeah, probably just the lights.
Yep. All right. Um, Next one is from Lemon Square. What was your first Game Boy Color, and Game Boy Advance game? So Game Boy for me, I already answered Pokemon because that's how late I got my Game Boy. But Game Boy Color, my first Game Boy Color game that I owned, I believe it was Super Mario Brothers Deluxe, and Game Boy Advance. Um, it was there was I believe it was a Top Gear game, but it was in Japanese because we got a Game Boy Advance used from a friend who didn't want it anymore, and then that was the game that came with it. It was like a Top Gear racing game. I believe it was in Japanese at the time, but I remember seeing screenshots of the English version, and it was exactly the same. So yeah, those are my answers. So yeah, one each, one Game Boy Color, and one Game Boy Advance game.
I
That
have them all right here. These are the three that I took out. So I have Tetris
no,
as my Game Boy. Game Boy Color was my Super Mario Brothers Deluxe, and Super Mario Advance. I've got it right here.
awesome.
Those are my three. Yeah.
For me, it was Mario Land, and Tetris, which I got at the same time. For Game Boy Color, it was Mario Advance 1, and then I believe I got Tony Hawk 2 like either that same day or the following. I think it was the same day actually that I was taken to the store just and was allowed to pick out another game. For the Game Boy Color, it's a bit harder to remember because I I didn't get it at launch. I just got it at some point, and I got some games for it, and I can't remember which one my first Game Boy Color game was. I do well, after getting the console, but my actual first Game Boy Color game by like a technicality was The Legend of Zelda: Link's Awakening DX. I'd gotten that
Yep.
when I still had an original Game Boy, so I guess in a way that was the first Game Boy Color game, even though I didn't get the Game Boy Color till afterwards and played it mostly on the original Game Boy. But I loved like getting the Game Boy Color and immediately just being able to made the beeline for that special dungeon just to get like a little more playtime out of it. Um, it's worth noting too. Link's Awakening DX is actually my very first Zelda game. I forgot to mention that earlier, and that's what got me into Zelda. So
That's
that's
also my
another
first Zelda game.
very poignant Game Boy memory for me.
Yep. Um, let's see. So next one is from Dari. We've answered half of his first question, which was Game Boy, Game Boy Color, or Advanced game that you want to see a full console remake. But we'll answer the other half which will be the sequels. If there's a Game Boy game that you want a sequel for me, like I would like to see sequels to like. I would like to see a sequel to the Golden Sun games. I know we had Dark Dawn on the DS, but I think it's time for a brand new Golden Sun game. So
I absolutely agree with that.
That'd be cool.
It's long overdue at this point.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I said Mole Mania before for the remake. I would say it for the sequel too. Like any sort of Mole Mania revival at this point would be amazing. But I don't know. Like I'm trying to think because like most games that I played in the Game Boy are games that have had proper follow-ups or are part of an established IP. I mean, like I guess we haven't had a Game & Watch gallery in forever. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's true. Yeah, we haven't. Imagine they just boom out of nowhere, all of them just drop. Oh, yeah.
I don't know. I don't know specifically what would be a sequel over a remake. I would say just I'm trying to take a look around my room and see what I got here that I could bring up.
Mario Pinball Advance 2? I don't know. Let's see. No, this is a good question.
I mean, I could take the easy out here and just say make another Mega Man Battle Network game, please,
Yep.
Capcom.
Yes.
With the time for that was several years ago. The second best time for that's right now. So let's just have that happen.
Yeah.
And I guess technically they did because they did Star Force, and that is a sequel series.
Yep.
Take a look here
But-
at what I have, because that is a good question. That is a good question. Let me see what I have here. Oh, ha! I'll tell you my answer. I just saw it.
Ooh.
Give us a better Dragon Ball Z Legacy of Goku game.
Yes.
Just give us Super and have it in like that kind of top-down style and just make it work.
It would be very interesting to see a Legacy of Goku style game in this day and age.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
very much a product of its time.
Right, that's the thing. I feel like those top-down Dragon Ball games, like now the way the top-downs are done, are very impressive. It has a
Yeah.
lot of potential to be able to not just be a fighting game. Like you can get in and do the rush and get out and still be able to kind of like tactically move around your opponent. Like there's a lot of potential to that top-down style now, and I think it can work for Dragon Ball.
It can.
So yeah, I would say a Legacy of Goku like edition. So I mean the next thing after what Boo's Fury would be whatever Super would be, Battle of Gods and Frieza's whatever, Resurrection F.
Yeah, exactly.
I would like to see that. That would be pretty cool.
All right.
I mean, Daima just came out, and then that takes place right after the Boo saga. So yeah,
Right.
have that be the
Daima?
weird game
Oh
tie-in
my
for
God.
Daima.
Daima would be great. Are you kidding me? Like having to go in the spaceship and travel at that. Oh,
Yeah.
You nailed it, Michael. You're done. That's it. Podcast over.
All right. Well, we still have a few more questions.
No. Let's go. I was kidding.
All right. This one's from Sown. What are your thoughts on the recent surge on modern Game Boys, like the Analog Pocket, for example, and all the homebrew games that are made for them?
Yeah, Michael, you look like you had a thought there. Go ahead.
No, I mean, you could go first. It's fine.
Okay. A fellow broadcaster that we know, Shell, Ash said hi.
Yeah.
She actually got, I think, the analog or whatever, and they love it. So, I mean, they're able to play their Game Boy games on it, and they carry it around, and they fell in love with it. So, I mean, I think it's fine. I think they're good. I have my quarrels with it, but they're not many. I have a feeling that if it works, it works, But if you're gonna try and use it as another way of what's the word I'm looking for? Not stealing, but like, there's like the technology is there to be able to do it. So I don't really have a problem with it. I think they're fine. I think that they add a little bit more vibrancy to your old games, and there are some people who still have their old games lying around, and they don't want to have to go through the hassle of, downloading ROMs and doing all of that jazz. So if you've got the cartridges and you lost your Game Boy, like, this is a really good alternative. So I would say, yeah, alternative would be the word that I would use. Um, I don't foresee myself getting those because I had bought two of those types of portable systems before. One for my NES and SNES games, and then the Superboy, which was for just the SNES games. And both of them kind of fell apart. So I was really disappointed in the make and the upkeep of all of that, and just that they were just clunky and put together pieces of cheap plastic and cheap screens. So I never really went back to those. But I mean, hey, if it's gonna work for you for like a short stint or however long they're gonna last, I think it's fine. I don't have any problem with them.
All right.
I'm in full support of like the aftermarket consoles just because they're a way to play those old cartridges without having to pull out an old Game Boy if you don't have one. If your system's worn out, you're getting a nicer way to play them. Like the Analog Pocket, I know people clamor over that thing. I know it's extremely expensive, but it's like you get like an amazing experience playing Game Boy games on it because it's just so clear and crisp. Um, I really don't have any real interest myself in getting those. I can't say I haven't gotten at least one aftermarket console, though mine is not particularly able to read cartridges. It is solely just for ROMs. Um, but I really like, it's like if I want to play a Game Boy game and I can't through official means, I'm just gonna, I'm gonna just use whatever I have on hand. I don't really see a need to go out and purchase a big like aftermarket like peripheral to do that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I totally understand that people would enjoy those, and there is a market for them. Definitely respect and support that.
Yeah.
I have to agree with that. Like, I feel like that, like, it's great to have a market just so that people could be able to have a platform to play these games on. Like, if you still have your games, but the consoles that you have don't seem to work as well, or you just want to try it in a new way, then to have these portable handhelds exist, plus trying new ways to play games with the homebrew games, I thought they're pretty cool. I actually think that it's a really good way, a really good alternative to have in case if you can't afford or you don't have access to like any of the classic Game Boy consoles and all that. So that's just how I feel about it. So I think that I'm glad that they exist, and I'm glad that they serve the purpose that they do. So there's that. The next one is from Homecoming. Favorite game to play on the Super Game Boy? And have you ever used the Super Game Boy on the Super Nintendo? Yes, I have used the Super Game Boy on the Super Nintendo. My favorite game on that, well, we're playing Pokemon games, but when it comes to a game that was made for the Super Game Boy, it's easily Donkey Kong.
Easily. Oh, same for me. Easily.
Yeah.
There was a
Sorry.
there was a good chunk of time where like if I was home and I was playing a Game Boy game or a Game Boy Color game that could run on the Game Boy, it was being played through the Super Game Boy. I just didn't want to like waste the batteries, and also just having to be able to play any game on the TV, even the portable ones, was just super appealing. When I was home, I would say that any of the games that had a custom border or custom effects in it were definitely up there. Like Mole Mania just had a custom border, but I believe it also had two-player mode on it, just with one. No, I don't think it did actually. Bomberman GB had the two-player mode accessible through a single cartridge if you were playing it on the Game Boy, on the Super Game Boy, as opposed to needing a link cable to play it multiplayer, which I thought was a really cool little function. Pokemon had the custom colors for all the sprites due to the ability to have it, like the Super Game Boy is able to write colors to like 8x8 pixel blocks. So because Game Boy was all static images, or because Pokemon was all static images, it made it very easy to have like all the Pokemon have colored sprites in it. And of course, Donkey Kong, you had the border, you had the colored backgrounds and the special sprites. You had the special voice clip for Pauline, and I didn't know this until recently when I streamed it. But if you beat it on the Super Game Boy, the credits theme is actually like rendered using the Super Nintendo's sound equipment instead of the Game Boy.
Wow.
Yes, that's true.
All right.
This is a special um thing that I got from Nintendo of
Oh,
the Super
nice.
Game Boy, and what it does is it gives you um in the back like all these different games, and like Yoshi is able to do color palettes on the Super Game Boy, and it tells you which color palette is used for Dr. Mario. And in the beginning of the book, it gives you um, different codes of colors to use for each game. And then it has this beautiful spread on Donkey Kong. And if anybody's wondering, you can just see how vibrant it looks and how colorful it is on the Game Boy, on the Super Game Boy. And it's so cool that they were able to make this happen. Yeah, here they are. So when you're going to visit different areas in Wario Land, Super Mario Land 3, it gives you color codes, like you can see here, for different sections, so you can give yourself like a feel for the area and how it can like enhance your gaming experience. This is such a cool little book, and they give you suggestions as to which borders to use for which games. I mean, this is really cool. This is one of my favorite things that I own of
Yeah.
the Game Boy. Yeah, and Super Game Boy games, like they say that like we're going to be coming out with these and that they have these unique borders and unique colors. So
Yeah, the
yeah,
little
I
symbol on the box. They
yeah,
were being
see, there
made directly for the Super Game Boy.
that's right, and that full compatibility. I think it's awesome. And you can also, by the way, if you didn't know this and you know it now, you can use the SNES mouse to be able to draw art on the borders and stuff, so you can make custom borders for yourself.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah,
Um. So there's two more questions.
yeah.
The next one is from Dragon. Do you prefer Link's Awakening on the Game Boy / Game Boy Color, or do you prefer Oracle of Ages and Seasons? I still have to play Oracle of Ages and Seasons, so I can't answer this just yet.
Yeah, I can't answer it either. I have to play Seasons and Ages.
I've played all three. I only played the Oracle games when they came to the 3DS Virtual Console originally. Um, they are very good for, especially considering it was Capcom's first attempt at making a Zelda game, which is really interesting to think that there was a whole chunk of time where Capcom was kind of in charge of all the handheld Zelda games.
Yeah.
Um, they're both really fun, and as a connected experience between the two, it's really neat to go back and unlock extra stuff in them and kind of get that true final boss. That being said, there's definitely some aspects of both which feel kind of like not as good as they would have been if they had maybe been a single, like more bigger, more polished game overall. Um, I have more memories of Link's Awakening, and as I mentioned, Link's Awakening DX was my very first Zelda game. So I'd have to still give it to Link's Awakening overall, especially after playing the remake a few years ago. Like even without anything changed, this still holds up so well. Maybe not $60 so well, but like it's still well worth experiencing. But I can't like discount the Oracle games either. Like they are absolutely worth your time playing through both of them. Either order is fine, doesn't matter. You're gonna get the same kind of bonuses either way. Um, I will say it is interesting that the Oracle games kind of split their focus between them, which is why which is interesting, but also why I said it should just have been like one bigger game, because like I think what is it? Ages is more focused on just combat, while Seasons is more focused on puzzles, and I think Ages is actually like the world map in it is more closely like it looks more like Zelda 1's map because it was originally supposed to be a remake of Zelda 1 on the Game Boy Color.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I may have that backwards. It may be Seasons that is that, but I think it's Ages. I think Seasons is the more puzzly one.
Yep. All right. Well, the last question is from DM21. Did you ever play any Game Boy Color games in the Game Boy Advance? And if so, did you ever play them with the feature that stretches the screen? Yes, I have.
Yes, I did.
Yes.
Definitely.
So basically, yes to both. That's all I can say.
Yeah, when the GBA first came out, that was when Pokemon Crystal also came out, and obviously I was playing that on the GBA. I definitely played a fair bit of GBA games on the GBA, excuse me, GBC games on the GBA as well. I remember I got like Harvest Moon 3, and that came out after the GBA came out. Um, Never actually used widescreen in any serious capacity. I would mess with it like here and there. I would just kind of click the buttons to watch it like become widescreen or not. But it's like it just doesn't look good. So I always stuck with the regular aspect ratio.
Yeah, after a while, I stuck with the regular aspect ratio, but and this is a deep cut for chat. I'm not sure if anybody will get this reference, but every time I click now to make the screen wider for the Game Boy Color games or Game Boy games on the Game Boy Advance, I always think of Strong Bad Email number 100 when he goes wide screen, left side more, right side more.
Yep.
And Homestar just pops up.
Yep.
He's like, I'm usually just behind the
I've been
glass.
here the whole time. Yeah.
Right. I think I might live here.
Yep.
I just rewatched all the Strong Bad Emails a few years ago because I've streamed the Telltale game. And I was
that's
like,
great.
I need to
still
catch
have
up
it.
on these.
Oh, so good. No, they're great. Oh, I'm still watching. to this day.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's what I think of now when I stretch it. But nowadays, I like to keep the original aspect ratio because everything looks just a little bit too like stretched.
Yeah. Even on like when I was messing around with the GameCube NSO the other day, I was like looking at like how Soul Calibur 2 does the widescreen, and I'm like, it's just making the menus look wider.
It does.
Like, and it doesn't
Yeah.
look right.
It doesn't.
I didn't really. I gotta look at the actual gameplay again, but like just looking at the menus, I'm like, this doesn't look good in 16:9.
Oh, the gameplay, like, yeah, it's exactly what it's supposed to be. But yeah.
Okay.
But when we get those games for the GameCube that had what was it called, progressive scan?
Progressive scan. Yeah.
That I think will fix a lot of that.
Yep. All right, so that's all the questions for the topic questions for sharing with Shellshock, and that's gonna do it for the show. So
Cool.
again, I have to thank the both of you for being a part of it as always.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm always happy to be here.
Yep.
Yeah, it's always a great time. Thank you, Shell.
No problem. Before we end the podcast, Michael Macaw, where can we find you?
You could find me at Michael Macaw on Twitch, Blue Sky, and YouTube. I'm streaming like 3 to 4 times a week, might be a bit more now with the Switch 2 being out and got some stuff to play. You can also follow me on Blue Sky. I'll be announcing any sort of new voiceover roles that come up there. Again, kind of hard to talk about it when stuff's still in progress because of NDAs and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And yeah, just at Michael Macaw, pretty much anywhere there's a Michael Macaw, that's probably going to be me.
All right. And Jeremy, where can we find you?
I ask myself that every day. So you can find me wherever you type in the Nostalgia Alchemist. I am on Twitch. I am just coming back this week after a 2-week hiatus, so I could just kind of get some stuff in my life in order. I have a podcast, which I'm trying to get some episodes back on. YouTube has been a little bit tricky because I'm trying to figure out what to do with that platform now. But if you type in the Nostalgia Alchemist, my face will pop up. I'm also a SAG-AFTRA union member, so I'm also trying to do voiceovers here and there whenever I can. Pretty tricky with 2 kids and trying to prioritize being a dad, but hey, I'm making it work. And yeah, I'm always here for whenever you remember why. And thanks again for having us on, Shell. Always a pleasure.
Yep. And of course, you can find me pretty much anywhere, like, although I'm mostly active on Blue Sky and Discord, but when it comes to the streams, I am always on Twitch, and I do have my YouTube as well for like archives and all that. My daily streams usually happen on Monday through Thursday from 7 or 8 p.m. Eastern till midnight Eastern, with the occasional Friday or Sunday streams. The next episode that'll happen is going to be GameCube. We're going to talk about the GameCube next week.
Sweet.
And the guests for that will be MMG Mike, Shad JV, Mr. Redbeard, and Toontress. Those will be my guests for next week's show.
Good lineup.
Yep.
Nice.
All right. So with that, that's going to do it for sharing with Shellshock. As always, take care of yourselves. Be awesome. Stay awesome. Tell your loved ones you love them. Check about them as always. Fight for a lasting peace. And I'll see you guys next time. And y'all have a good one. Thanks for watching Sharing with Shellshock Season 4. Your name will be inscribed in the pages of podcast history.